Oh, we did it guys. We ranked them. We ranked those 22 bad boys. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be my ranking of every palette, every eyeshadow palette that I tried in 2022. And by happy, wonderful, glorious coincidence, there are 22 of them. So we're ranking the 22 palettes from 2022 that I tried this year, worst to best, least appreciated to most loved. Without further ado, let's get started. So slight explanation of just how I'm going about this, okay? This is not necessarily like the worst performing to the best. This is like my favorites, my most loved order, the order of preference, whatever you want to call it, just the one that I love the least to the most. So that's just the way I decided to go about this, okay? Take things with a slight pinch of salt, because especially when we get to like the top end, like my top sort of 10, it really is very dependent on like my skin tone, what season we're in, what the occasion is, as to which of these is like my ultimate favorite. Very, very hard when you get into the top 10, where I absolutely love all of those eyeshadow palettes, as to exactly what order they go in, because it really just depends on my mood and the makeup I'm doing and the occasion that it is. So I've tried my best to put them in an order that makes sense, but that wouldn't necessarily be the same order every single day of the year. That's what I'm trying to say, okay? Just a slight little disclaimer there. But in 22nd place, my least favourite of the palettes I tried this year was Chanel's Tweed Pourpe. The thing about Tweed Pourpe is she just gives me nothing. She's giving me nothing. The shades are all far too close together. They're too close to each other. There's no light in shade. There's no real variation that you can like speak of, either when it comes to finishes or when it comes to the shades themselves. There's just nothing. There's not enough pigment. It's a nice, what could be a nice little color story of a quad, but it literally gives me nothing. It gives me nothing to work with. When I put this on the eye, I don't even know what to put where, because they're all basically the same color. And yeah, it's just, I will never choose to use this again. It's pointless. It was a pointless exercise. In 21st, we have Dior Backstage's Coral Neutrals. Definitely a colour story that I thought and expected to love. This is me. I love these peachy shadows, and I really expected to love this one, but the pigment and the performance is just not there, particularly when it comes to the shimmers. The mattes and some of the satins, you know, they've got colour. There's enough colour there. I love the colour story. We've got some rich tones. We've got some lighter tones. It's got everything I needed it to have as far as the colours, the colour story, the shades. All of that stuff is good, but the performance is just really disappointing for me. I just can't get any impact out of the shimmers. They're just not enough. It's just not giving me enough to pull off how much I like the colour story. So that one was a bit sad, a bit disappointing for me. In 20th place, another eyeshadow palette that I thought I would love based on just the naked eye, just looking at it, checking it out, looking at the colour story. I thought, I'm gonna love this, but I didn't. It's Tom Ford's Tiger Eye. And again, it's the performance letting it down for me. It's a really nice colour story, but there's just no oomph in there. I need some oomph. You can barely see anything on my hand. There's really no impact when it comes to the shimmers. Again, something that could have been really beautiful, but every time I use it, I want to like whack a Pat McGrath shadow on the top. Okay, that's just how I feel and my preference. I think what we discovered this year is that Tom Ford shadows in general are perhaps not my cup of tea, because they just never give me enough. Like I always feel like I'm lacking something. And so yeah, not a huge hit for me. Now, next up, let's talk about Nars's Summer palette. This is in 19th place, but I don't have it any longer. I actually gifted this to my sister because she's definitely a bit more of like a makeup novice. She doesn't wear a lot of eyeshadow, and it's a really easy staple palette to work with. I think for me, it wasn't a fail. There was just not really anything that was wowing me about it. Not the color story, the performance was okay. It just wasn't one that was going to get any use in my collection because it's just going to get lost here when I have a lot of eyeshadow palettes, color story and performance that I prefer. It's just to me a very sort of average, neither here nor there palette. It was fine. It was certainly was not like one of my favorite palettes from Nars, but yeah, nothing terrible about it. A couple of the shimmers in there I found a bit crumbly and a bit chunky for Nars's typical shadows. Yeah, definitely not my favorite. Not a disaster, just sort of meh. Nothing to like love about it. In 18th place, we have the next Tweed palette from Chanel, and this is Cuivre. This was definitely a step up from Pourpe, I will say that for sure. Still maybe a little sort of limited as far as how much impact it's giving from the shimmers, but a colour... Excuse you. But a colour story I can get along with. It's certainly going to like kind of do what it says on the tin as far as like an everyday neutral palette. Again, doesn't really wow me once it's on the eye. Yeah, just kind of like okay for a very done and repetitive colour story. I think I'm going to have to de-thumb. This isn't going to work. And in 17th place, another of the Chanel tweeds. This is Fauve. This is potentially, when I looked at them, the one I expected to be my favourite because it has that peachy colour story, very similar colour story to the Tom Ford Tiger Eye, but this one kind of performs a little better. It's just got a bit more about it. It's got a more impactful shimmer, a more pigmented shimmer. So the effect that I get from this one is definitely something that I'm happier with pigment wise and just impact. You guys remember that I got these palettes really early, like before they launched and were sort of widely available. And I wore this one in a couple of videos and I couldn't put what it was. I wasn't safe to talk about yet, to mention about yet. Chanel are very funny about posting products before they allow you to post them. Until Chanel has like announced it and it's widely available on their US and UK websites, you can't mention them or they will take your video down. They will take you down. Okay, so I didn't want to mention what palette so I did not want to announce that I had these or show them until it was safe to do so, but I did wear this in a couple of videos and I had lots of compliments, lots of people begging to know what is that on your eyes, it's so beautiful. And I think if you just are happier with a quieter, less over the top shimmer sparkle impact, you will love this because it's very easy to work with. All of these were very smooth, easy to blend, no issues with the actual application process. For me, this is, in order to be much higher, I wanted, again, a bit more impact, a bit more shimmer, a bit more shine to the shimmer shadows, but it did give me light and shade. It gave me, you know, a couple of looks, really, really nice formula. And actually I was pretty happy with the final look. Was it a huge big wow factor as far as the shimmer? No. Are they like, you know, Pat McGrath, Natasha, Denona shine and shimmer and sparkle? No, but I do actually appreciate what this gives me. It's more subtle, it's quieter, it's more muted, but it is beautiful. So moving on, in 16th place, it's Hindash's Monochromance. This, as you can tell by looking at it, wildly out of my comfort zone. But that is one of the things that I really liked about this. I used this a good few times when I first arrived, did a good few looks out of it, really surprised myself that I enjoyed it, that I was happy with the looks. The formula in here is fantastic, very buildable, very easygoing, very beginner friendly, but the color story is just something that is really challenging for me and is just not my kind of general cup of tea. When I reach for a palette, I always want shimmer. Very rare that I'll do an all matte look. Sometimes in my day-to-day, if I'm just in a rush and, you know, I'll reach for my Bieber. But this one, you know, it being very like colourful and being all matte, it is just something I don't find myself reaching for very often, and it's just not my kind of typical go-to type of palette, but formula wise and artistry wise I really appreciate it. It's just not necessarily for me, but I absolutely had fun playing with it and learning how to use it, and it was a lot more user-friendly than I expected. Now in 15th place we have Nars's holiday palette. Why do people make eyeshadow palettes so hard to open? I mean, for God's sake, I'm gonna mark you down in a minute. So in 15th place we have the Nars holiday eyeshadow palette, Stargaze. Now this was another of Nars's eyeshadow palettes that really pleasantly surprised me. I feel like looking at it, I think what it is that these sort of rectangular pans don't aesthetically please my eyeballs. You know, I don't look at this and think, oh, beautiful, glorious. I think it kind of conceals the beauty within. It doesn't show it off. It doesn't sort of wow me as much as, it just doesn't please my eyes. I don't find the rectangles aesthetically pleasing, but this is a gem of a palette. This is quite new to me. I only just received this in PR about a week ago, so I've only used it a couple of times. This is a really beautiful palette. Again, one from Nars that kind of is unexpected, and I wasn't expecting to love it. It looks like a very sort of done eyeshadow. I love this shade in here. This, I don't even know what you would call this sort of purple. Is it like I don't even know what it is, but it gives a really beautiful kind of touch of purple to the neutrals that are pretty much in here. Essentially, other than that purple, this is a neutrals kind of everyday palette. I've been really loving using the two mattes and this sort of redder matte here, and then there's some really beautiful shimmers in this palette that, again, like Nars delivers that really wet shine, really beautiful, and there's some really lovely performing smooth mattes that blend beautifully. Really lovely options for neutral looks, and yeah, it was one that actually really surprised me because I always kind of expect not to like Nars eyeshadow palettes. I just feel like it's a product from the brand that isn't super talked about, isn't really overly popular, and again, the look of them just never really wows me or appeals to me, but this one on the eye is a really nice everyday neutral palette. So I was pleasantly surprised by that one. Definitely, in my opinion, better than the summer palette. Next up in 14th place, we have ABH's Nouveau, their comeback palette. This is the shadow that I was just thinking reminded me of the Nars palette. This one I think is just a bit brighter and more vibrant potentially, yes. So this is a bit more of a louder version of that one. This for me really marked like the comeback of ABH. You know, this was really going back to like their best, what we know them for, and I was really happy about that. I feel like it's quite a unique kind of colour story. It's a bit earthy, a bit grungy with a couple of sort of brighter shades in there. I really enjoyed playing with this. I definitely felt like the formula was a bit of an improvement, certainly on the kind of more recent shadow palettes from ABH, but this was kind of even a step up from like their sultry, their modern renaissance, all of those soft glam, that era of palette. I feel like this is a step up for the brand. Everything, especially the mattes, less fallout, less kick up, smoother, easier to blend. I like the shimmers in here. I think it's a really nice staple palette with great formulas. It's not one I feel like I use a huge amount, but it definitely put ABH back on my radar, and I really enjoyed playing with this one. And I got some really lovely looks that I was really happy with as well. So for me, I was just happy to see an ABH palette that I was interested in. We're back 5 years ago. And in 13th place, if you were wondering when the final Chanel Tweed palette was going to come along, here she is. And it is, of course, Tweed Brun et Rose, my favourite of these little tweed quads from Chanel. And the reason why this one was my favourite is because it has the most kind of unique or special colour story. It's, you know, all of the others are very like overdone. We've seen them a million times, and not that we haven't seen this colour story, but just having something more cool toned and just different, especially for Chanel, kind of made it stand out to me. But this definitely has the most impact of the four. It's definitely, this shimmer is the shiniest, gives the most reflection, and it's just the overall look that you get from this combination of these four shadows. It's very pretty, cool toned, elegant, refined, very, very soft and muted, but there's something very pretty and just classic and classy about it. Exactly what I want from Chanel, but just enough impact for me to love it and want to use it at the same time. So yeah, I really appreciated this color story, and for me the impact was just about there enough that I was going to get like a look that once I've finished it, I'm like, yes, beautiful. I don't feel like I'm crying out for more. It's just beautiful, elegant, still muted and classy and classic like you would expect from Chanel, but just enough that I'm happy that I've got the light and shade, that I've got some balance, that I've got some matte and some shimmer, and it just gives me a look that feels finished. Just a very, very pretty understated palette. And in 12th place, we have the Huda Empowered palette. I really like this palette. I got quite a bit of use out of it, but what I find about it is that I'm kind of always drawn to stay in among the same shades every time I use it. You know, I'm not really a big fan of these really yellow gold shimmers or colours on me, and there are quite a few of the mattes that are very close to each other, so that's a little bit frustrating. I love these shadows over here, these mattes, and the more neutral shimmers in the middle are all beautiful. They give me a really wet look amount of shimmer and impact that I really love. Some of these shimmers are really loose and crumbly, and they give a stunning finish. I mean, that is a gorgeous shadow, but because they are looser, there is quite a bit of fallout there. I found the mattes in this palette to be like Huda's best ever, not as dry as they typically can be, and the colour story is really gorgeous. I especially love these sort of smoky, earthy mattes, and I really love that there's some real innovative formulas in here. Like, she had loads of new formulas, loads of options. You can get a lot of different looks out of this palette, but for me, I just find that I'm kind of always staying over here because, you know, the yellow golds are not really for me. A lot of these shadows are basically the same, so it was a great colour story, great formulas in here. I like the step forward, but there's just, you know, a few little tweaks in there that made it like a really like and not a love. But probably my favourite palette from Huda. Really got some gorgeous looks out of this, so I really appreciate, and I can definitely see the formula has really taken like steps forward. So yeah, I really, really like it. It's not quite into the love top 10 territory just because of those few little things that I would have loved to have changed about it. I like the packaging. It's a nice solid big mirror, nice size palette, lots to like about it, but for me just was slightly missing on like going into the love category. And in 11th place, just missing out on a top 10 position, it's the Dior Khaki neutral. So the Backstage formula, but this is the Khaki colour story. I think for a Khaki neutrals colour story, they absolutely smashed it. It's got everything I want and a couple of little unexpected additions like this sort of yellow mustardy gold shade in there that somehow works gloriously. I was really surprised. If you watch my review of this palette, based on like the fact that the last couple of palettes I tried from Dior Backstage or Dior in general, I was disappointed by, including, you know, this one. I really had very low expectations. I didn't think it was going to impress me. I didn't think I was going to be wowed, but I really was. I think it's just the colour story is so excellent. It's got so much to work with. And yes, I don't think, a bit like Chanel and Tom Ford, Dior doesn't give us, you know, crazy over the top metallics. They are quieter, they are more muted, they are less impactful when it comes to the shimmer. And there's definitely a couple of things that I'd love to change about it. This shade, I wish this was this sort of really sparkly metallic shade that is this one up here. I wish this was a really light green shade. I feel like that would have just complemented it far better than just this random really silvery bright sparkly shade. I think that was maybe an error. But the rest of it, the earthy, khaki, greens and army greens just go together so beautifully. And this yellow gold or mustardy type colour, I really didn't think I would use that. I think I used this entire palette on my eyes when I reviewed it, and I was so surprised. I felt like the end result was something that was really unique and really pretty and effective, and I just loved how it turned out. And I was pleasantly surprised that I liked it so much, and it delivered. Although it was quieter and more muted, and the shimmer and the satin formulas are a little too close to each other to really tickle my pickle, actually it worked on the eye, and it gave me a look that stood out, that was unique, that was different, that I really loved. So a pleasant surprise. If this had had that shade be, you know, a really shiny, high sparkle, light green, I think this would certainly have made it into top 10 territory. Something to work on, Dior. You know, if you want to get in my top 10, you've got to give me the impact. So here we are, we've arrived in top 10 territory. All of the palettes I'm about to talk about have given me varying amounts of joy over the year and are all varying degrees of wonderful and glorious. Starting us off in 10th place, it's the second Pat McGrath by Bridgerton collab palette. I really like this packaging, unlike the blush palette. I think this is a nice, solid, travel-friendly size and a nice, sturdy little palette with a good size mirror. I mean, this shade alone, like, gets this into the top 10 for me because it's just so... so up my street. That really high shine, sparkly, like peachy pink. Yes, please. This is not a colour story I kind of like look at and think, oh yes, please, I know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with it, if I'm honest, but I just kind of guess and I put stuff in some random places and it gives me a gorgeous, pretty, quite unique, glorious eyeshadow look that I have never been disappointed with. It is a little muddled as far as a colour story for me and what I'm usually doing with my makeup, but like I said, there's just some stunning shadows in here. That chartreuse and the shift of it is insane. This shade is just delightful. I mean, all of the formulas in here are gorgeous and it somehow all comes together, even though it looks like madness is going on in here. It somehow works, and because it's Pat and this is the type of shimmer that I just want on my eyeballs, I love it even though I'm slightly confused by the colour story. It just somehow works. I slap it on willy-nilly, colours in places I didn't know those colours could go, and I'm here for it. And in 9th place, a little quint. Just love the opportunity to say quint. I just looked at that and thought, wait, are there 5? There are 5. It is a quint, and that gave me an extra opportunity to say quint. I can't get enough. This is the Nude Allure quint from Pat McGrath's Drink Every Time I Say Quint. Don't, because you'll have a hangover. This is the warmer toned quint from her holiday collection. I think both of these quints are just fantastic. They're so pretty. They have such lovely creamy shimmers, and I love that she gave us, you know, a matte in each palette that works so beautifully with the colour story. I think they're a really comprehensive quint and it just gives you a whole look. I love the idea of these. I really like the packaging, the fact that you still get a little mirror even though it's so diddy, and I think it's a really great quality of quint. I can only apologise. But a very pretty, if like slightly, you know, boring colour story for Pat McGrath. You know, she doesn't tend to do boring colour stories. That one is about as boring as it gets for her, and I've really enjoyed it and I was really happy with the look that it gave, as well as the opportunity for people to get a Pat McGrath palette, 5 shadows that gives you a full Pat McGrath look with the quality of her usual shadows that we've come to know and love, made in Italy, and you know, for under £30, I think. What more could we really ask for Christmas, I tell you. And in 8th place we have the Bridgerton 1. I can't believe both of these came out in 2022, but I've checked and they did. I promise you, I've already checked. Okay, maybe someone should check that again. Fact check me. I'm pretty sure. I know that I received them both in 2022. Maybe it was released 6 months earlier, but that's how long it took to arrive. Wouldn't surprise me. I definitely came to prefer this to the second one. I thought initially it was the other way around. Maybe the packaging threw me, but this is definitely my favourite of the two. I just think while both of them have a slightly wild colour story by my books, this one definitely is more cohesive and just to look at it, easier going as far as working out like what goes where, because it's just, you know, the shadows just seem to work together more easily and more cohesively in a family. This one's got some random cousins that rocked up out of nowhere. This was one that really surprised me because yet again, looking at these shades, these aren't really my shades. The colour story in general is a little, you know, confusing and intimidating for someone like myself. Yet again, there was no shadow on that finger. But yet again, I found it somehow works, and that blue pinky shifting shadow is just gorgeous. And the look that I got with this palette was so surprising to me and so pretty and just really unique. It's one that when I wear, basically this shadow is the star of the show. Whenever I wear an eyeshadow look with this palette, people are like, what is on your eyes? People are drawn to it because it is really unique. That blue shade is so pretty, and there's just something really pretty and girly and just lovely about it. It gave me a lot of fun and joy in a colour story I didn't think was necessarily for me, but the final look with this palette just turns out so lovely and just elegant, and yeah, I love it. And I didn't think I necessarily would. And I do love a nice surprise. I think this is 7th place, but who really knows at this point? It is, unfortunately for you guys, the second of the holiday quints from Pat McGrath. And this is Bronze Bliss. Definitely my favourite of the two. One of my favourite cool toned eyeshadow palettes of all time. Such exceptional quality in here, such impactful shadows. I love all of the shimmers in here, are just absolutely stunning. They're so creamy, even swatching them now, they feel almost like creams. They're so soft and smooth and buttery, and for a quint, you just have so many options in here. It's so comprehensive, so over the top, impactful, glorious, beautiful, at such an amazing price point. It's such a beautiful palette. If you like cool tone shadows, you will not, cannot be disappointed. Do I perhaps wish we had more than one matte? Sure, I would have taken another matte. I will take one if there's one going. But I just think it's stunning. For a quint, all of these shimmers are absolutely glorious and it gives you such a beautiful look. I think because the only matte that we have in here is like a black, it's hard to get like a daytime look out of it. That's what would be my one criticism. For me personally, what I like to do daytime makeup wise, this is a little too much for me, a little too dark if I'm to use the matte. So that would be my one criticism, but for like a nighttime, evening, cool toned look with a lot of impact, it really doesn't get better than this. And now in 6th place, we have the one and only Charlotte Tilbury entry of the year, as she neglected to gift us with a large palette this year. This is Pillow Talk Dreams. Now, I know what you're thinking, what a boring palette when we've just been going through all these glorious, over-the-top, pretty, unique colour stories. This is a very, like, done, repetitive colour story. I understand, but it's absolute perfection for me. This is the type of colour story I live for and love and will wear every day of my life happily. I should not have put that on top of a really wet hand that I just wiped off, but oh no, this is not helping. Let's try again with a drier hand. Yes, that's better. I was not really doing it very much justice then. But yes, this is a very done, like, neutral quad eyeshadow palette that we all have these sorts of colours in our collection. The thing that I love about this, I mean, I'm a big fan of Charlotte Tilbury eyeshadows. They always just are so pretty and elegant, and they aren't quite as impactful as Pat McGrath and Natasha Denona as far as shimmers, but they definitely give me enough for what I want daytime wise, and I just love this colour story for a quad is perfect. It's a full look. It does everything I need in one, in 4 shadows. I like that we've got 2 mattes, 2 shimmers, kind of varying intensities. It's just absolutely perfect for me for an everyday quad. Someone who doesn't have a huge big collection and wants soft glam makeup and likes neutrals, it's absolutely perfect, and I really get a lot of use out of this in like my everyday makeup. It's just so pretty, and on the eye it all comes together so beautifully and seamlessly that it's one of those that's really simple but effective for me. And now we arrive in the top 5. A little free poem for you there. It's been a while, I feel. It's been too long. And really all of these are real loves, like favourites of all time for me in these next 5 eyeshadow palettes. Really hard to kind of mix them up and put them in an order because all of these were massive hits for me. But in 5th place we have Natasha Denona's Retro Glam palette. I love this palette. There's so many looks that I've done with this that I've really loved, and I feel like it's kind of different and unique enough to stand out and be really interesting and exciting and fun to use, but it's kind of muted enough that I am happy to wear it day to day, in the daytime, you know, on the school run. I don't think it's like super crazy or intimidating for me, but it is special and unique. It's in that sweet spot between everyday neutrals and like pastels. It's just in the middle where it's still in my comfort zone, but it gives me something a bit different. And these greens are just, I love greens. I love them. The formulas in here are exceptional, and I've got some stunning looks out of here. I do agree with what a lot of people have said, that we kind of feel that it is missing like a really deep, rich, either like a khaki or maybe even a sort of greenish brown matte with real depth and richness would have just made this like a 10. So it's kind of a 9. I feel like if there had been a couple of deeper, richer mattes in here that really complement this colour story, this could have been number 1 for sure. I think that the fact that it does feel like we're just missing 1 or 2 shadows in here definitely knocks it down a few places in my heart and in my ranking, but it's still a palette that I absolutely love, and the performance is stunning. Like Natasha Denona's best formulas, from the mattes to the shimmers, everything in between. The colour story is stunning. If only we'd had that richer matte or satin that we are crying out for, it's really crying out for it in here, it would have been perfection. Very close to perfection, but still a palette I absolutely love and get a lot of joy out of. And now in 4th place we have the first Lisa Eldridge palette in this ranking. There is another one to come, and it's Sorcery. I did expect this to be my favourite. It was the one that I was most excited by. I think if you had said you can only purchase one, I would have picked this one and purchased only this one at launch. It was the one I was drawn to. It's those greens. I feel like it's the most unique and special and different colour story across the Lisa palettes that she released. And it absolutely did not disappoint. It's so stunning on the eye, and I feel like this is greens and blues in one 6-pan, which is, you know, who manages to give us that? The quality of these shadows and the formulas blew my mind, and it does still. They're so pretty, they're so easy to work with, and the look on the eyes that I get when I dip into this palette is always just glorious. In my review I compared this to like a mermaid, like a fishtail. It's just the shine and the contrast and the shift. Everything in here is just really special, unique, and just the most amazing quality. Super fun, actually super versatile, because this deeper matte, you can use this really lightly and it actually be quite soft and subtle, and there's definitely a good few different looks of varying intensities and varying amount of colour that you can get out of this palette, despite it being a 6-pan, which I think is something really special. I love the packaging, and they're a joy to use because I just think the quality and the usability of these formulas from Lisa is incredible. Let me tell you, other than the number 1 in this ranking, the top sort of 10, certainly the top 5 were moving. I kept on changing my mind and going back and forth, having to wear one and then wear the next one the next day and try to choose between them was incredibly hard. The next couple even more so than most, but in third place, it's Natasha Denona's My Dream palette. Oh, just look at her. She's so stunning. And I feel like this one has a lot of little surprises in there because there are some of those cream powder formulas in here. They always kind of surprise me because they always turn out a little different to how they look in the pan and even how they swatch on the eye. But there's just something so beautiful about this palette and so wearable. There are so many gorgeous mattes in here that are so easy to work with for everyday, for soft glam, for neutrals, for just, you know, one and done shadows. I feel like it's really comprehensive, and I love that it's got so much neutral everyday, but it's also got shadows like this one down here that just give you the wow factor. So pretty, so stunning. That shadow is so funny because as I'm swatching this and even looking at this now, this is like bright green, but on camera I can see that it's purple. How do I get you to see the green? Is it there? I don't know if you can, but it's just so interesting and pretty. But there are also some gorgeous, more wearable for me, easygoing shimmers. I absolutely love this row here. It just gives you a really smoky, cooler toned look. Again, I like these kind of unique mattes down the bottom that are a bit more cool toned, which really changes up a look depending on how you combine things. It's just a really easygoing, everyday, fairly neutrals palette with incredible formulas, but with some fun in there at the same time. I've got a lot of use out of this palette, and it's just one that really appeals to all of my preferences, how I do my makeup, how I wear my makeup, the occasions I wear my makeup to, and what suits me. It ticks a lot of those boxes. And I definitely think some of these mattes that I thought were like, oh, those won't really get much use because they're just, you know, they're super deep and rich, and then actually on the eye they're much more wearable and softer than I expected them to be, and they actually get a lot more use than I thought. You see the green there? Can you see it? Just about crazy. It's pink, it's green. It's pink, it's green. Magic. And now in second place, just off the top spot, it's the second of the 2 Lisa Eldridge eyeshadow palettes, and this is Vega. And again, like I said before, this kind of, not that it was an afterthought, I definitely thought it was the second most interesting, most tempting of the eyeshadow palettes, just based on the images and the swatches that Lisa did and just the description of the shades. But I definitely think that if I was told you can only have one, I would have chosen Sorcery, and how wrong I would have been. This looks, it's just so sneaky and understated and quiet, and it looks at first glimpse, you know, nothing special. You know, some cool tones in there, some mattes, sure, some shimmers that look okay. It's so deceiving as to how special and beautiful this palette is just to look at it in the pan. I feel like whenever I use this, I wow myself, okay? Whenever I use this on the eye, I end up loving how it turned out. It's just so elegant and classy. I love that it is cooler tone, but in the most wearable way. And it's so versatile in ways that I didn't even really think until I started using it a lot. But I'm very often just using these 2 mattes, very subtle, soft transition shades with one of the shimmers, and it's the most beautiful, elegant, classic, understated, cooler toned neutral eyeshadow look that's so flattering and just beautiful. You know, add any of these 2 mattes and you've got a gorgeous smoky eye that, again, although to look at it, they're not crazy, colourful, wacky, pastel, bright shades, but there's something so unique about them that you end up with a really gorgeous, eye-catching, appealing look that people are just like, what is that on your eyes? I get asked so often, and even when I wear this now, all of you guys know exactly what eyeshadow palette it is because it is so special. And it really is far more unique on the eye than perhaps it looks just seeing it in the pan. And again, just like Sorcery, the most incredible, easy to use formulas, and that's one of the things that really makes it so special, because this sort of really smoky grey blue shade and the black can be used so easily just to add a bit of depth to the crease or used as a liner without it being really hard to control and struggling, you know, to blend them out, or it getting patchy, or it just making everything far too smoky for what you're looking for. You can really easily use those smokier, deeper matte shades in here just to add a bit of depth and a bit of dimension so easily and so lightly, because they're just so easy to work with. Again, the lid shades that look so unassuming in the pan are just so stunning, so pretty, so reflective, that they really give you such a unique combination. It's just such a beautiful, cooler toned palette, but in such an elegant, wearable way. And I find it so versatile. You know, whether or not you involve these two richer shades can take this look from everyday, barely there subtlety up to, you know, a New Year's Eve smoke show with absolutely no problem. Very easy, beautiful to work with, such a unique color story, and just such a special bunch of formulas in that palette. It really just makes me want to use it all of the time, because I know it's going to be easy to use, I know it's going to be very wearable, but it's going to be like special and unique at the same time, and it's a very rare little gem to find these days. And so that leaves us with but one palette to talk about. You may have picked up on the clue that I am wearing this palette today, but I have raved about her ever since she came into my life, and it is Pat McGrath's Mothership 10, Mothership X. What is the other name for her? We don't know, because it's Moonlit Seduction. We do know, it's right there. This is just like my dream Pat McGrath palette. You guys know I've been dreaming and imagining and thinking and wishing of like an all neutrals Mothership. Just to think about it makes all the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Imagine, you know, 4 different neutral transition shade mattes and a whole bunch of neutral shimmers and special shades in a Mothership. All my dreams would come true. This is as close that we've ever gotten. And these mattes in here, I don't know what it is, but this one especially on me, as kind of pinky berry toned as it looks in the pan, when I use this in the crease lightly, it really gives me a kind of warm neutral brown matte. So that's actually a really pleasant surprise. I've now learned how to work a bit easier with this deeper, cooler matte, very lightly, not picking up too much on my brush, and it gives me a lovely, wearable, more neutral, richer matte. But the shimmers in here are just my favourites ever. They're so beautiful, they're so unique, they give me so much impact, and it's just absolutely stunning. The colours, I mean, this again, like I spoke about in the Bridgerton second palette, this is like that sort of same pinky, peachy, over the top, wet looking shimmer that I absolutely live for. Struggle not to put it on my eyes every day of the week. These topper shades are just stunning, and I love that we've got, you know, a warm tone or a cool tone version just to add a bit of extra shine and shimmer on top of any look. You can easily do an everyday look out of here as well. I kind of tend to use these 2 mattes and either this stunning shimmer or this one, and you've got kind of a very easy, everyday, quieter but still very beautiful eyeshadow look. It's got everything I want and more, and very, very versatile for a Mothership, very, very usable. There is not a single shadow in here that doesn't get a lot of use, which usually with a Mothership there's 1 or 2 that are like, I'm not really going to use those. I use every single shade in here almost every time I do my makeup. It's just my favourite ever. It gives me so much joy. I've enjoyed it so much, and every look I do with it I just absolutely love, and it's just perfection to me. It's just obviously me in a palette. It ticks every single box and more, and I love her. Oh, we did it guys. We ranked them. We ranked those 22 bad boys. We ranked these palettes until the cows came home, and we've got it. We've got our order, our 22. What did you guys think? Do you agree with my ranking? Do you disagree? Were there any surprises, any shocks, or was this order pretty much what you would have expected based on my reviews and how much you see me using things? What were your thoughts on these rankings? Please let me know your #1 palette of the year in 2022 in the comment section down below. I'd love to know what your favourite palette was this year. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.